Dani has a degree in psychology and completed her PGCE last year. She's currently working towards her qualified teacher status in the UK. During her time studying her bachelor's, she volunteered at a charity that focused on helping adults with brain injuries. She also worked at a school for children on the autism spectrum. She currently teaches a range of subjects from A-level psychology to T-level health and also GCSE child development. Dani has a unique approach to teaching her students about subjects such as menstruation and reproductive and sexual health. I'm so excited to chat to her about the amazing work she's doing with the young minds of today. Dani, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited for us to get started. Would you mind kicking us off by telling us a little bit about your journey into teaching?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited too. I think these conversations are so important, so that's good. My journey into teaching, I actually never wanted to be a teacher because I was like, not for me. I didn't enjoy children. I didn't enjoy any of that. And then, as you mentioned, I started working with children on the autism spectrum, and I was doing individualized programs with them, and I just loved it. And I was like, oh, okay, actually, maybe I do like children. Maybe I do want to work with them. And I started working with them, and then did my PGCE because I have a degree in psychology. Did my PGCE, and then I got recruited to come and teach in the UK, which is where I am now, which is great. And yeah, as you mentioned, I teach a range of subjects, 4 in total, another one next year, which is going to be very interesting. But I definitely have such a passion for teaching, and I know it's where I'm supposed to be because I just come alive in the classroom, and it's I love that no day is the same. I love that all the kids have these unique stories and they have their own like little worlds, and you can like peer into them. Yeah, I love it.
Incredible. I think being able to find that thing that makes you come alive, like you said,
Yes,
with writing as
yes,
well, must be so helpful. Contributes a lot towards that, right? Going in, not really knowing what you're going to face. Speaking of that,
absolutely.
are there any challenges that you face as a teacher? Kind of what are some of the main things that you would say that you come up against, maybe on a daily basis, around just that role and that responsibility of teaching as well?
I think the main challenge in teaching is I think there's like this misconception actually about teaching that well, from the kids' point of view, they think that we live at school and that we go into the closet on the weekend and we come back out on that weekday and we just keep on teaching, and that we are actually people outside of it. I think that's a big thing for children. But in terms of teaching itself, I think it's really tricky. So for instance, me wanting to teach more about the menstrual cycle and like getting in tune with your hormones, it's lovely. However, there's not really a space in the curriculum for that. So you've got to be very strict with the curriculum because they've got to sit an exam. And I find that's very frustrating because I want to teach more and I don't really have that allocated time. So we can, and what I do generally do is I do, when I'm teaching, because my subject does lend itself to do that, I do teach more than, so the kids do have that, but I just wish there was more time, that there was more allocated time, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that's one of the main struggles. Yeah, and admin, but that's fine.
Every job, right?
Yeah.
So in particular, the curriculum is something that you and I discussed during our intro call as well, something that I've been really interested in, especially with the recent launch of the Women's Health Strategy by the government. And as part of that, there's kind of like a huge, I guess, like attempt to reshape what the curriculum looks like
Yeah.
in the UK. So at the moment, from your perspective and your experience, obviously you've got such like a unique insight into what the curriculum actually looks like. What does it give space to? Like, what does it allow you on paper to teach?
Okay. So at the moment, and I had a little look into what the government in the UK allows us to teach, and they've got like a beautiful, like, this is what we want you to be teaching, this is what you need to be doing in PSHE. And I'm like, that's fantastic, but it's still very limited because, and even having chatted to a biology teacher, I said to, because they do the reproductive system with the kids in like year 7. And I said to them, oh, okay, well, what do you like? How many lessons? Like, what do you actually teach? She's like, it's probably about 4 out of the whole year. And I was like, that's not nearly enough. Like, yes, you're teaching them what the actual structure looks like, and they can label it perfectly. But do they understand the mechanisms behind it? Do they understand the role of hormones? Do they understand that we as women have a different cycle to men? Like, where is there space for that? And the honest answer is no, there's not, because it's very, very rigid. It's very like, this is what you need to be teaching. So in my subject for child development, we talk about children and how they obviously develop. And we go into the reproductive cycle and all of that. And we go into contraception and we go into this. But it's still, I find, too rigid. It's far too rigid. It's only when I started teaching anatomy to my year 13s that I had a space to talk about the role of hormones, that I had a space to talk about the reproductive system in more depth. And I'm like, that's great. But I think that young girls need this, and even young boys, they need this earlier. Like, we need to be teaching this stuff earlier, because I don't want my students to be like me at the age of 26 having to learn this stuff by themselves. It's not, if that is the case, then I failed as an educator. Like, that's not what I want for my kids. Yes, you can walk away with a GCSE and you can walk away with an A level or B Tech or whatever you're walking away with. But what like core knowledge do you have? Like, what life skills do you have? Do you understand your body well enough? I think that's just, I get like really, really frustrated because I really just want to hone that in. And we do have, we've got like 20 minutes in the afternoon with our tutor basis. So like with our home groups or that kind of thing, our register groups. And there is a space to talk about some topics, but 20 minutes is not nearly enough. And you kind of like just pick it up and then you have to put it down because the bell's gone, they have to get to the next lesson. So I've actually asked for a meeting with my deputy head principal to chat about incorporating a time when we can actually talk about these things, even if it means that I have to start a club outside of the curriculum and get people to join in and listen to that. Because again, one person, that's all you need. One person says to this person, says to that person. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And honestly, I wish I was just reflecting on my own education and my own experience within the school system. And if I'd have had a teacher like you, I know for sure that I would have just felt more equipped, stepping into adulthood. I would have understood my body a lot better. I would have understood the systems and cycles within it. I also think, to your point there, the role of hormones, how important that is for us as
important.
and in all honesty, I think the only reference to hormones that I would have experienced or like been on the receiving end of is like, oh, you're a bit hormonal today, like when I was on my period or something. So I was, they were almost demonized in the sense of like, oh God, she's on again. She's hormonal.
Or like you're in a bit of a bad mood. Oh, she must be PMSing or she must be on her period. No,
Yeah.
I'm also a person with feelings and I'm allowed to have feelings as well. But also what I'm learning is that if you are having these terrible mood swings, it's a complete hormonal imbalance. Why are we not told that? We're told, I'll take a paracetamol, I'll go have a nap, or I'll eat a piece of chocolate. No, why were we told balance your hormones? It's crazy. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I think also the balancing of hormones, if I think to my group of immediate friends, like that wouldn't be something that any of us had ever considered, ever, honestly. And I do think now, especially as I'm stepping into this coaching space, I see a lot of like hormone balancing coaching, hormone balancing therapies. And my immediate response, and it's the wrong response, but my immediate response is, God, I don't need to do that. That's, that's a
It's so
step too
much work.
far.
Yeah.
That's too much. Whereas actually, this should be something that's built into our lives from being a teenager.
Exactly. And where do you start that? At school? Like you're spending 6 hours, 7 hours of your day there. Why not? Why are we not?
Absolutely. I really wanted to understand as well about you in particular, because I do think this conversation hopefully will be shared amongst different teaching circles and
Oh, I hope
obviously
so.
your own network and things like that, which I just think is incredible. Like you said, it just takes one person to spark that really important change. What motivated you as an individual to start taking a different approach to teaching?
To be honest with you, it started with my sister, Brittany. You had her on the podcast as well. She's brilliant. I love her to pieces. The way she thinks about things and the way she researches and that kind of stuff. So she really opened my eyes up to a different world view and a different perspective. And for me, it's more that I want to do more by the kids. I had a lovely, okay, she was a history teacher, so like not really life lessons, but she was an amazing, amazing teacher. And when I went into the teaching career, I was like, oh, I definitely want to emanate that. And I had another teacher when I was growing up who I remember it clear as day. I was 13, and she said, you must always ask why. And that's stuck with me. It's absolutely stuck with me. And I really, going into just the teaching profession, just before becoming really like engulfed in like balancing hormones and like talking about the menstrual cycle, I wanted to be like those teachers. I wanted to be those ones that have an impact. But now, like it's very easy to have it's not easy to have an impact, but it's not difficult to impact a child's life just by listening to them. However, now I'm like, I want to help you further. I want to help you grow. I want to help you walk into life with this knowledge that you don't end up where I am. And I think that's a huge driving force because I'm having to teach myself these things. I'm kind of like, as an educator, I need to be doing that for other kids. That's my job, is it not? So I think that's where that undercurrent of like that huge passion comes from. And I've always been the type of person who's not really I'm not worried or nervous or anxious to talk about sex or menstrual cycle or any of that kind of stuff. I've always been very open about that. And I think that's really good because it lends myself into like being able to teach about that. So even when I do bring it up, and they have their little giggles and stuff, I'm like, okay, well, it's fine, that's normal. But like we're going to be talking about serious stuff here. So let's get all the giggles out.
Absolutely. And giggling, as long as you're talking about it, giggling is is
As
very
long as it's
welcome.
going in, it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned there that you have been on a journey of teaching yourself. I think every 20, 30, 40 something year old woman has, find themselves in that position where we haven't been given that education at the time in our lives that we should have been. And we've been let down really by the curriculum and by the school system itself. So from the knowledge that you've been teaching yourself, can you maybe share an example of something that you've learned that you've then been able to translate and teach your children?
So, I my first like bit of learning came from Alyssa Vita. I don't know how to say her name, but in the Flow book. So I'm actually still busy working my way through it, and that's where a lot of my knowledge has come from. I have taken what you said. I've then done further research. I've had conversations with other women. I've done all that kind of stuff, and in with my year 13s in teaching them the anatomy. I was like, right, this is what's happening. And we got to sections. So it was the way the curriculum was set up was brilliant because we went to each like body section. And then we got to hormones. I was like, yay, can't wait. And I was like, right, guys, I'm reading this book. And I actually grabbed the book out my bag because I have it on me all the time. And I was like, right, I need to read you something. And I read straight from the book. And what that did was the girls were like, oh my word, like this is amazing, to the point where one of them actually went out and bought her book. And we now have like conversations about it. I'm like, yes, this is what I want. We need to be talking about this stuff. And she's like, this has changed my life. And I'm like, absolutely, let's go. And then when we got to like the reproductive cycle, because I'm just so passionate about talking about it, my kids would come in and be like, oh, Miss, you'll never guess what happened to me today, or you'll never guess where I am in my cycle. I'm like, yes, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. This is why this is happening. So it's just like, because, and I by no means am an expert, but because I've got that like little bit of forethought and I'm very happy to do the research for them or to like set them up and be like, oh, why don't you go check that out? Like, why don't you go look up about that? It lends to being able to have those discussions, which is helping me teach them and helping me educate them better, which is really important, I think.
I think it's so important. And also just the sharing of that must have felt so gratifying to have like, off of her own sort of her own back, go out and buy a book that you've introduced. And
It was
I
amazing.
yeah, I know the book as well, and I am also
Yeah.
equally as obsessed. I completely understand why she had that reaction and why you have as well. And I think to your point on not needing to be an expert, for me, that's irrelevant in the sense that as long as there's an appetite to go away and do the research first, or like you said, encouraging your students to go away and do their
Yeah.
own research and maybe asking them to bring something back into class
Have a conversation about
or
it. Let's
come,
talk
yeah,
about it. Yeah.
come
Yeah.
back to me on this.
Mhm.
Awesome. And the overall reaction that you get from your students when you take this approach to teaching, you've just shared there with the year 13-year-old girl that you teach. What's has it always been, is it always a positive reaction from students? Have you had any kind of resistance to this kind of
Um,
stuff?
for the most part, and I think because I teach mainly females, which is just by nature of what the subject I teach, for the most part, it's quite positive. However, while I was busy teaching the reproductive system and we are having a conversation, the kids and I in class, another teacher walked into the class and she was like, why are you talking about this stuff? And I was like, first of all, it's in the curriculum. Second of all, like these should not be conversations that are taboo. Like we should be talking about this. And I find that so, it really bugs me because I'm like, I understand that you can't just go out there talking about sex to teenagers because there's obviously safeguarding policies in place. However, if you are educating them with the right things to make the right choices, what's the problem? I mean, my mom and I were having a conversation the other day because one of her friends in the primary schools in this, the school below secondary, they nurseries, they were saying they're going to start teaching like sex education to these like 8-year-olds, and the parents were all kicking off and be like, oh my goodness, no, like we don't consent to that. And my mom and I had a conversation about that, and she was like, I get that, but also then you get the some of the kids whose parents are like, oh no, go for it, like teach them. And then you get the kids who aren't being taught that, and then they're getting told by their peers things. So my thinking is, would you not rather have it from an educated mind? Would you not have it rather from a teacher than a peer who's going to be giving them wrong information or misleading information or information that they found off some really dodgy sites? We know that the internet's all freely accessible and we don't know what the kids are learning out there. So would you not have it come from a place where there's an undercurrent of educating and teaching and like actual care, not just, oh, guess what happened, you know?
Absolutely. And to a point there, completely 100%, kids will learn about this one way or another, right?
100%.
So, have some control over the way in which they are, at least first being their sort of their first introduction to the topic. Because I do think that the information is out there, and while some of it is brilliant and really well researched, a lot of it isn't. So having that as a parent, having that kind of that say, I guess, in the way that these topics are first introduced to your
And when
children.
they taught as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. If I just think to the conversation around teaching LGBTQ plus content in schools,
Yeah.
and the absolute uproar, it's we could have a whole other podcast just talking about
Yes,
that. But
absolutely.
that's where my mind went, right? And maybe it's slightly different and slightly more nuanced, but I do think this kind of aversion from parents comes from that generational divide, right, amongst this stuff. This is the reason why they have that reaction, is because their own education didn't provide them with the same level of access and information, which I think is terrible. They've also been let down.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
100%. And I think I love this phrase at the moment. We have to unlearn to relearn. And we've really got to unlearn those toxic cycles. We've got to unlearn those toxic habits, those backwards thinking, to relearn a new way to be with each other, a new way to talk to each other, a new way to like understand each other as well. And that goes in every undercurrent of life, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And moving on to the topic of menstruation, and it's something that is so severely undertaught at school. Honestly, it's actually criminal. I can't believe
Yeah.
that we're still in this situation. So in your experience, in your opinion, what's currently missing from the curriculum as it is today on what is taught to young people about menstruation within schools?
I think it's more that there's not enough time spent on it. It's kind of like, well, you go through puberty, this happens, you shed your lining, it's done. No, like there's so much more. There's so much more to that. There's period pains and endometriosis and PCOS and all these other reproductive issues that aren't spoken about, why they happen or when they happen or what happens to them. I think the biology behind it is done really well, because in biology they go into like great detail. But what about the social aspect? What about the humanitarian aspect? What about I'm really having a terrible day? What about the hormones as well? Like that's not taught in biology. and it's a biological system. So why are we not learning about that? Why are we also not learning about where to get help and when to get help, or resources that we can use, or learning how to even insert a tampon, for instance, because that for me was the most terrifying experience of my entire life. And only through peer pressure did I actually get to that point, which is ridiculous. It shouldn't be like that. It should be so normal. Like, I think in some schools, and I was having a conversation with some friends yesterday, and I know in South Africa, some schools, they bring out bananas and you put condoms on bananas, but we're not taught how to dispose of tampons. We're not taught about how to insert tampons. We're not taught about menstruating like in any depth, you know. We're so lacking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also one of the areas that I'm particularly interested in, and this kind of feeds in, and I actually think fuels this, is the shame and stigma that is associated with menstruation. Because you're right, you use the word normalized there, and it's not normalized. And as a result of that, we live in this society, and it's different across different countries against different kind of societies. West, West versus East, absolutely,
Yes,
completely. There's so much nuance, but one of the similarities globally is that 9 times out of 10 women are often, they feel shame around their periods. They
yeah,
feel
you
shame around
shouldn't.
menstruation. And you shouldn't. It's your body. It's your body
Exactly.
working, doing what
It's
it's
doing what it's
supposed to
supposed
do.
to be doing. Like it's
Yeah.
such a natural process. It's as natural as urinating. Like, I don't understand why it's, oh, gross. Oh no, like, come on, guys. Let's,
Oh,
like, come on.
completely. Completely. Um, and this might be a bit of a philosophical question, in the sense that the answer is probably something patriarchal. Um, but in your opinion, why has that approach been taken within our curriculums? Why is it such an under researched area?
I think it definitely is. It goes back to, I hate to say it, but it does go back to the patriarchy. I mean,
Mm.
even just if you're looking at medical studies, women have been excluded for years and years and years. There's medication out in the market that we don't know how it affects women because we were excluded from the initial studies. And for me, I'm like, how wrong is that? Like, how can a doctor say to you, oh, just go take this? You don't know what it's doing to me. You have no idea because you never ever tested on me. I mean, if you look at the concept of pill, for example, there is a male contraceptive pill, but it got taken off the market because of the side effects. There's 3 times less side effects than there are for women, but it got taken off. Why is that happening? And I think, unfortunately, and I hate to be that feminist, but unfortunately it filters down. Like, it filters down, and it filters into every single area of our lives, unfortunately. Whether it be in the medical profession, whether it be in the classroom. It really, really does, unfortunately. But that's what we need to change. We have this awareness now. Let's change it. Like, let's do better by our kids.
Absolutely. And in the interest of building on that point and sort of thinking about strategizing to help other teachers to start to embody the approach that you're taking, what's a bit of advice that you would give? Say I'm a teacher, I'm interested in broadening my students' horizons on these things, providing them with the right information or at least the motivation to go away and do some of their own research, bring it back. Where would you start? Where did you start? And where would you advise another teacher who's new to this to start
I
their
think,
journey?
to be honest with you, I think it would start with a conversation. So I think it's important to have a conversation. And like, I remember I turned to my kids in class one day and I said to them, they're year 12, so they're about 16, 17 now. And I said to them, where did you guys learn about sex? Like, did you learn about it at school? And majority of the answers were from peers. And I was just very, very sad about that. Although one child did tell me about a school that she was at that did a really, really good initiative. So that's something I'm thinking about. But I think it started the conversation. So, and then what I would say to any teacher who wants to go into this is do some research, figure out where your voice is and what you want to say. And don't be afraid to not have the answers. There's so many, like, I think the misconception with a lot of things is that you have to know everything. And I really struggle with like not knowing everything. But I've gotten to the point where I'm like, actually, that's a really good answer. I have no idea. I will come back to you. I'll do some research, you do some research, we can come back together and do it. So for any teacher wanting to start, have a conversation with your students, feel where they want to be, what they want to know, and it all depends actually on the relationship that you have with them as well. I tend to have a really good relationship with my peers, my students, because I think it's really important. So I think you have to start that conversation, ask them what they want to know, ask them if they would be interested in knowing more further outside of the curriculum, ask them if what topics you could go and discuss, what topics they're interested in, set them a research task. Like, kids have so much access these days. I mean, you can flick on TikTok, you can say to them, let's all go home today and look up a TikTok about menstruation. And I'm telling you now, they will come with several different theories. So there's so much information out there. We might as well just use it. But again, use them as a guide, and see where they're coming from, so you know where to bounce off of. Because also, again, you've got to be careful with the younger years. You don't want to give them too much information. So a really good way, and especially when talking about sex and for example, is to find out what they do know and what they want to know more of. Build off of what they already have. You don't want to overload them, and you don't want to give them too much that's too early for them, but just build off what they know. Because let me tell you something, they know a lot more than what you think.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately. I think that's just been a thing for me. When I was chatting to my mom through several times throughout my life, and we got onto the topic of how you bring up a conversation about sex with children. And she said to me, you should always ask questions. So you should always ask, oh, well, where did you hear that? Or what do you mean by that word? What is a blowjob? What is that? And find out what they know first before you say, no, don't, you don't go, no, we don't talk about that. Or you don't say, oh, well, this is what it is. You work with what they know already, and it's a very fine line to walk, but you dance that line like that, not giving too much, not giving too little.
Yeah, or shutting down the conversation.
I think shutting down is the worst thing you can do, because then they go and they get misinformation, or they don't get any information, and then what have you done?
So to summarize a little bit on those points that you just shared, there's something around starting the conversation in the first place with students. There's also something in there about finding your own voice as a teacher. So finding a subject that maybe you're naturally interested in or passionate about, or that you feel that you have the propensity to go away and at least research. And also then with regards to maybe some advice to parents as well in there about this is the conversations that you can start having with your children, especially if they come to you with things that they've already heard. Less about shutting down, more about opening up.
Working from a place of curiosity.
And a place of curiosity. And I think also being mindful that shutting something down then inherently starts to attach shame or stigma to the topic.
It intrigues them more, and then they go do dodgy research.
Which in of itself is such a shame, actually, given that there was that opportunity where they could have learned something that was genuine and true. When it comes to the topic of menstruation, particularly when thinking about parents with young girls in their home, what advice do you have? Any advice? And if so, what would that advice be to them about that topic around? Your daughter comes to you, I've just started my period, or I have these questions about my period. What does that conversation look like to you? What should it look like?
I think ideally, before a child starts their period, their menstruation cycle, I think there should be conversations that I've had before. So unfortunately, these days, girls are developing a lot quicker than what they used to. So you have to have these conversations a lot earlier and saying, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. You can explain the biology behind it, explain the role of the hormones behind it, but keep that dialogue open, because it's a very scary thing to happen. And for a young girl, I mean, I think I was 10 when I got my period, and it was a very, very scary experience. And I remember I went to my mom and I said to her, listen, this is what's happened. And she was very good with me, thankfully. But I think it's also because I was very open, and I was like, well, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. And I said to her, but I remember the experience being like, oh my goodness, there's just blood everywhere, what's going on? am I dying kind of thing. And that's not how it should be. It should be like, oh well, this has happened, it's great, it's fantastic. You're like now a woman, well done, fantastic, you're brilliant. But definitely destigmatize it, so it's not a gross thing. It's not like, oh, what's going on with you, that's disgusting. It's, oh well, this has happened, let's celebrate it. Let's go out and get you what you need. This is the different ranges, these are the different things, this is how you use this, this is how you use this, this is how you dispose of this. And you can say to them, it's not going to be easy, and there's going to be various different things that you maybe want to try until you're comfortable with them. Again, I just think that open communication is really important, because I know for me, my experience was I went straight to my mom, my younger sister. She hid it for 6 months because I don't know why. I think she was shamed. I don't know, but she hid it for so long, and I'm like, that's so bad. Like, why would you hide something like that? You know, like, it's such a big thing to happen. Why would you hide it? Yeah, it was very sad. And she's only like recently told us that she hid it. So I was like, oh my goodness.
And you had no idea.
We had no
Yeah,
idea. Both of us, both me and my mom, like, we had no idea. And I'm like, how sad is that?
yes, absolutely. And also indicates just how easy it is to be able to hide something like that.
Yeah,
I think where my mind went then when you were talking through there was that a lot of mums, because they themselves didn't have the education that's required, don't have the knowledge and don't have the that, well, I was going to say the access, but they absolutely do.
yeah.
But I do think as well, if I think to my relationship with my own mum, my mum is 40 years older than I am.
All right.
So her experience in school was, well, I can't even begin to imagine, definitely nowhere near the level of information that we would have in our generation, and even we didn't have enough, right? So imagine
100%
what it was like for her back in
back
her
then.
day. Um, and I know that if she'd have had the information, she would have absolutely shared it with me. And I think what was missing from my own experience with this was my mum sitting me down and basically saying, look, these are the things that you could maybe start researching, or even just sharing her own like experience with her own period.
Exactly.
But because of the shame and because of the stigma that was that it's shrouded in, it becomes a very, very challenging conversation to have. But I think even if you're a mum that doesn't have the information or didn't have the education that is required to be able to talk about these things, at least encourage some kind of curiosity within your child.
Exactly. Like,
Um,
I don't have the answers, but we can find it together.
Exactly that, right? So it's a partnership, it's a journey that you're sharing with somebody else that you hopefully have a good relationship with, that you love and you trust. And I learned most of the stuff that I know, which is honestly, up until a year ago, very little about menstruation
Mm.
from my mates. And they were all just learning it maybe from their older sisters, or like, like
Exactly.
none of us really knew or still know to this day what actually goes on throughout a 28-day, whatever, menstrual
Cycle,
cycle.
exactly. It's very sad. And like, my sister and I have just started like a group on WhatsApp for women who want to talk about that. And I'm like, it's so sad reading these stories about these women who have to like who have been misinformed and have to relearn, unlearn and relearn again. And the stories are so similar. They're so similar. And unfortunately, I think again it goes to the medical profession, where we done such an injustice there as well. Like, they tell us, oh, well, just do this, just do this, just do this, just go on the hormone or contraceptive pill. Like, what? What? How is that a solution? How is that a solution? No, there must be more. There must be more, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be up to us as females or as women or as young girls to have to tell a professional, this is what I need from you. Like, it's ridiculous that we have to do that. And that's why I'm like, I refuse to be that teacher. I refuse to be that professional who a child has to say, I need this from me because you're not giving it to me. Let's talk. Let's talk about it. I'm very happy to. Like, I'm
Incredible.
very happy to give up my breaks and my lunches and all of that to talk about it. Yeah.
Incredible. And on that note, I really wanted to conclude this podcast by just asking you what's top of your list, like what's top of your agenda if you look towards the next couple of months of teaching. What is it that comes up for you that maybe gives you that excitement? What types of conversations are you planning? What types of things do you think are going to come up from your students? What does it look like?
So I am having a conversation with my deputy head principal or head teacher to talk about how we can incorporate this, because I think we need to do more. And I'm very happy to start a after school club and a break time club or whatever. And I've got quite a few of my teacher friends who are like, oh, absolutely, we'll 100% talk about that because we love that topic. We definitely want to like educate kids more. I'm like, that's brilliant. So I've already got like a little gang of people who are like, let's do it. So having a conversation about that, either in a PSHE or in a club or whatever, I just think it needs to happen. So even yesterday we spoke about how we've got staff platforms for women who are dealing with infertility issues, and we've got platforms for people who are dealing with other like mental health issues. I'm like, okay, cool, that's great, fantastic. We're moving in the right direction, but let's do something for our kids now as well. Like, let's do something where we can talk about that. And yes, again, like I say, you've got to be mindful of the safeguarding policies and those kind of ideas, but let's talk about it in a safe way. Let's talk about it in a curious space, being curious about it, not in an unsafe way, not in a misinformation way. I think that's what's really important. So for me, conversations moving forward, definitely my year 13s come in, they're like, oh, the period queen. I'm like, yep, that's me. Let's go. Let's talk about it. Where's everyone in their cycle today? And even often I have conversations in the staff room where I say to someone's like, oh, I'm really feeling like really down or whatever. I'm like, oh, where are you in your cycle? What day are you on? And they're like, and I'm like, yeah, no, we need to have these conversations. And then I launch into a whole thing. And then they're like, oh, actually, might be that. And I'm like, yeah. So I think for me, it's just keeping open, keeping honest, learning a lot more, expanding my knowledge on things so that I can share it where appropriate. Yeah.
Incredible. You're a genuine inspiration. I'm honestly sitting here just wishing that I had a teacher like you, but also that is then outdone and outshone by the fact that you are here right now and you are doing all of these incredible things for your students.
Oh, thank you.
And it starts with teachers. If I think to my own experiences with teachers, some of the most influential people in my life were teachers. You shared about your history teacher, you wanted to emanate them, and that is exactly what you're doing right now. So I really hope that you do take the time to really deep that and really think about the impact that you're already having on young people. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Absolutely. I think the biggest goal for me, and it's on my goals this year, is to be the person that I needed to these young girls. I needed someone like what I'm trying to do. And I don't want them to walk through life being like, oh, I really wish I had. I want them to be like, actually, I did have, and it really changed my life, because I think when you start off earlier, you can change your life for the better sooner. And that's what's really important.
Couldn't agree more. Dani,
Yeah.
thank you so much. This has been such a delight. I'm so grateful for you taking the time out this morning to have this chat. I feel like we need a part two. I feel like we need to follow up in like a year's time.
When I've got everything going, I'll
Yes.
message you. I'll let you know.
Well, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Please keep doing what you're doing. And we will speak to each other again very, very soon, hopefully.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Dani.
you
I
so
really
much.
appreciate it. No
Thank you
problem
so
at
much for
all.
having me on. I really appreciate the conversation. It's so good to get this out.
Yeah,
So thank you.
of course, of course. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.